fathers from Trinidad all the way up to Puerto Rico, the UK, United States, have been doing a tremendous job to help us. And I am grateful. There's a long, long road ahead. The quote of no
Good morning, all. The meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs is hereby reconvened. This is the 18th meeting of this committee, and the committee today is convening for the purpose of having its second public hearing pursuant to its inquiry into certain aspects of the national insurance system of Trinidad and Tobago. The hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Members of the viewing and listening audience may send comments via email at PARL101 at ttparliament.org or on the Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament or on Twitter at ttparliament. Now, having got that out of the way, I would like to warmly welcome the officials and representatives of the Employers Consultative Association, the National Trade Union Center, and the Joint Trade Union Movement. There are no ladies apparent, so may I ask you gentlemen to just introduce yourselves to us and to the viewing and listening audience. Starting from Mr. Johnson.
Okay. Good morning, and to members of the Chamber and the JSC. My name is Trevor Johnson. I am the Assistant General Secretary of the Joint Trade Union Movement.
Pleasant morning, Madam Chair and your committee, and also to the viewing public. My name is Michael Anizet. I'm the General Secretary of the National Trade Union Center and also President General of the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Nirvan Maharaj, President General of the All Trinidad Regional Workers Trade Union and Second Vice President of the National Trade Union Center. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Madam Chair and the committee, and I must say the people in Tobago and those in Trinidad. I am Watson Duke. I wear many hats. In this meeting, I'm simply the president of the National Trade Union Center. Thank you.
Morning, Chairman and members. My name is Keston Nanko. I am the chairman of the Employers Consultative Association.
Good morning, Chairman. All other protocols observed. My name is Ronald Ramlogan, and I am the team lead for public relations and research at the Employers Consultative Association.
Gentleman at the back.
Good morning, Chairman and other members. I am Ashton Cunningham,
the General Secretary for the Federation of Independent Trade Union and Non-Governmental Organization, also the General Secretary for the Fire Service Association.
Good morning, Madam Chair, the rest of your committee, comrades and colleagues. My name is Peter Burke. I am Vice President of the OWTU and member of JTAM.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee, comrades all. Christopher Henry, President of the Steelworkers Union, joint leader of the Joint Trade Union Movement.
Thank you, gentlemen. It seems as though we are privileged to have a room full of celebrities for today's hearing. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sophia Choate. I am an independent senator in the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. This is one of the committees which is chaired by an independent senator. And I will ask the members who form part of this committee, or at least those who are present, to introduce themselves to you. Dr. Francis.
Lavelle Francis, member. Good morning.
Clarence Rambarat, member.
Taharko Bika, member. Good morning.
Terence Dialsing, good morning, member.
Thank you. Now, just so that we start from the right point, I'm going to read out the 5 objectives of the inquiry so that those who may be now joining us will have an idea of where we are. First, to examine the recommendations of the 9th Actuarial Review of the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago, to examine the implementation of the actuarial recommendations of the 9th Actuarial Review of the NIBTT, to examine the investment policy of the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago, to understand the trends in income and the relationship to the payment of benefits, and to make recommendations to improve the sustainability of the national insurance system. Now, at this stage, what normally happens is that the head or leader of each group is asked to make a brief statement lasting no more than 2 minutes. But what I have to do at this stage is, because of an emergency, I have to take my leave, and the vice chairman of this committee, the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Clarence Rambarat, will take my place and will continue with the inquiry. And I'm sure that there will be much fruitful discussion that will come out of it. So since I have to leave, I have to thank you for making the effort to be here and for contributing towards our inquiry.
Morning, thank you very much. So maybe we could start with the introduction, with the opening statement from the Employers Consultative Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Decent work expresses the basic aspiration of people everywhere for work that allows them and their families to live in dignity. Moreover, decent work is universally accepted as a pathway out of poverty once conditions of equity, security, and human dignity are present and maintained. In this regard, the Employers Consultative Association recognizes social protection or social security as an integral part of this effort. The International Labour Organization has also advised that social protection is about people and families having security in the face of vulnerabilities and contingencies throughout their life cycle. This organization further recognizes social protection as a key element of national development strategies and its role in achieving sustainable development and promoting social justice.
Thank you very much. Mr. Duke.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much for inviting National Trade Union Center to an inquiry into certain aspects of the national insurance system of Trinidad and Tobago. May I state here and now that we received this document on the 23rd of November 2017, and we were asked to do a presentation of our ideas on November 29, 2017. The issues here are deep, they are wide, they require meticulous study, and I will say general consultation with our membership. So NATUC considers it a form of disrespect, I would say, to be given the 9th actual report and to be asked to comment on 3 narrow issues: the role of employers in supporting the sustainable development of national insurance system of Trinidad and Tobago, the potential implication of an increase in the retirement age on workers, the performance of NIBTT in distributing benefits to employees under your remit who submit NIS claims. We are confused this morning by the time given to respond, and so therefore NATUC response this morning would be a little wider than what it has been confined to, given that we represent in excess of 80,000 people in this country, which represents a lot of families. So until the questions are asked more directly, I will reserve my comment as to explain why we considered it to be disrespect.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me clear up a few things. One is that the 9th actuarial review has been in the public domain for a few years now. It was for the period ended 2013, and the trade unions are represented on the board of the NIB, so it would have been something that I expect would have been discussed at the level of the board. The document has been in the public domain. Having said that, the purpose of the brief and the questions given to NATUC and to all the other groups would have been to identify some of the key areas for discussion. But you have heard the 5 areas that the committee has set itself for its work, and it covers more than those 3 areas you've read out. The point of this inquiry is to take in the context of the 9th actuarial review, and the 9th actuarial review really builds on what has been in the public domain and set out in the first 8 actuarial reviews. There are some things in the 9th actuarial review that are either new or more focused than previously, but the general trend has been that unless we raise contributions, unless we deal with the issue of the retirement age, and unless we look at the investment portfolio of the fund closer, we would run into problems at some stage, but that is based on actuarial assumptions. So it is not the only time for NATUC or any of the other groups to contribute. The purpose here is to open a public discussion involving you, to give you the opportunity to make further submissions in writing, and if necessary, to invite you back again, either in camera or publicly, to make a further contribution, because it is not a new matter, it is not an easy matter, and as you've rightly said, the 9th actuarial review is a very substantial document, which we accept that you would need to not only consult with your membership, but also consult with your expert advisors. And I give you the assurance on behalf of the committee that we recognize the importance of your role and the importance of your contribution, and there is no desire to to close this inquiry today. We recognize that it requires much more time than today. Thank you. The other.
Okay. Good morning again, members of the committee, Deputy Chair, Trevor Johnson, representing the joint trade union movement. Just want to express on behalf of the JTUM and of course my colleagues who are present with me, and just want to thank you for the opportunity that we have to deal with this issue, which, as you rightly said, is a very complex issue. The national insurance system was introduced as a measure of social protection and is well supported, as we know, by conventions and recommendations of the ILO. We too, whilst notwithstanding what you have just indicated, we too would have certainly, for the matter of record, would have certainly like to have more time to prepare for this particular session, but I'm also grateful and noted that you have indicated that there will be other opportunities, and hopefully we will be invited back. That's the representatives of the labor movement, so that we can perhaps by then, having had the time to make the appropriate consultation, because it's not that we have only just begun it when we got this this particular correspondence or invitation, but this is something that the labor movement, certainly the joint trade union movement, have been discussing for some time now. But it is a complex issue, and we would certainly like to have the time to be able to give greater consideration to it. Nevertheless, we thank you for the opportunity given today, and we will be expressing what I would consider some preliminary recommendations and areas of concern as the session goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. And I believe we have someone from the other group. Is there another representative who wishes to give an opening statement? No? Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Well, I would ask Dr. Lovell Francis to open the discussions.
Good morning, gentlemen. Obvious question to start with is both Mr. Johnson and Mr. Duke mentioned the issue of having not enough time to really vet the actuarial report. Obvious question to start with. Even given the shortened period that you would have had to look at it, what is your take on the document from whatever review you would have done?
Yeah, well, perhaps I would be just begin with some preliminary comments, part of which I'll quote from the consultations we have done so far among ourselves. It appears to us that the 9th actuarial report reflects that the NIB, or the National Insurance System, is in a financial dilemma, certainly. And one of the things from a layman's point of view it seems to be pointing to is that the level of contributions that are made at present seems to fall short in terms of when you compare it in terms of the payments or the benefits being paid out. The National Insurance System is a pay-as-you-go system, pay-as-you-go social security scheme. So it relies on multiple contributions to each recipient of benefits. Its contribution income must at least equal, or better still exceed, the benefits that it pays out. Plus, of course, we have the whole issue of administrative costs. And from our reading of it, it seems this has, since 2013, there has become, would have been challenges before that, but since 2013, there's been a serious problem or gap created, And it has led even to investment income being used to supplement the shortfall. So there are two critical areas to highlight. One is there seems to be a declining ratio of contributions to benefits expenditure. And it also appears that NIS is paying out benefits at significantly higher levels than their income, so that, or inflows, so that you have a declining ratio of contribution to benefits expenditure. In short, they are paying out more than they are getting in. But one of the, well, I don't know if I could go, one of the immediate concerns we have, and because every day, on a weekly basis, workers come through my union, the Banking, Insurance, and General Workers Union. And one of the complaints very often is that contributions, or their contribution is deducted from their salary. That's a fact because they get their pay slip, etc. So, but when they check with the National Insurance Board, they are finding that these benefits are not reflected or in terms of what is allocated to them. So clearly there seems to be, I don't know, I can't speak to how wide scale that is, but we do get that complaint repeatedly. And therefore, if you're talking about the question of inflows, immediately one of the concerns that, that comes up is the issue of the administration of the national insurance system. What is happening, for example, with its compliance system? How is it possible, for example, for deductions to be made from workers' emoluments or income? Remember, this is not something that the worker goes to pay. It's deducted beforehand. It's a statutory deduction. So therefore, the worker has no say. Once you're a salaried worker, it's deducted. And why is it that some of these payments are not reaching the National Insurance Board when workers go to, say, very often close to their retirement, workers will take the opportunity to go and check to make sure things are in order. Because the other hand, and I'll stop after this, is that you get statements from the National Insurance Board as an individual on an ad hoc basis. So every so often you're surprised, you look in your mailbox and you see your mail from the insurance, but it's not on it's not calibrated on a quarterly or yearly. It's not sure. You just see it every now and then. You get a statement. You're surprised. You look at your statement, and then you realize there are gaps. And when you go to the National Insurance Board, they indicate to you, well, we did not receive those payments. Sometimes you go back to your employer, they said they made the payments. Or then you discover that your employer has not remitted those payments. So a number of scenarios evolve. So immediately it draws the question if the National Insurance Board is claiming that there are shortfalls in its income stream. Clearly, there are probably funds that were deducted that are not reaching, and there may be other issues that we need to understand in terms of the efficiency of the administration of the national insurance system. So I would like to pause there for now.
Okay. Could I have a take on it from Mr. Duke?
Thank you. Thank you, member, for asking Natuk to comment. I read the document, not all of it, and what I saw on the document is a lot of plagiarism, taking other people's work without giving the credit to it. A lot of statistics been quoted, no reference as to where those statistics were taken from. I also see a lot of figures misrepresented, of which I'll point out just one. There's a document that would have come from this document. It's written by NIB, called An Overview of the National Insurance System. The pages are not numbered, so I can't reference the page I'm reading from. But under the population projection, when one do a meticulous check on the ages of the population between 2013 and 2063, 50-year span, you will recognize that the age groups 0 to 15 would decline by some 86,000 plus in 50 years from what it was in 2013. That's what they're putting here. It goes further. Between the age group 15 to 59, you will see that also declining to some 202,000 within 50 years. But the age group 60 years and over increases exponentially by 212,000 plus. Where these figures came from? What is the basis for arriving at this? A lot of statistics. Then, as you turn the same page again, in the same document under minimum pension, a statement is quoted as if it's truth, but it must be rooted on some sound doctrine. Currently, the minimum pension represents 115% of the minimum wage. Well, I had to go back to my books, and I recognize the minimum wage is set at $12.50 per hour. Am I correct on that? 50. 15. Okay. So it's less, $15. Okay. It has increased, so I'll withdraw that point. But there are several statements throughout this where I see statistics are placed for us to believe in, but it is not said where the statistics is coming from. This is a serious document, and there must be some table of reference, some bibliography, something that says to us that these documents are true and honest and can be replicated in other documents. So I am left to conclude, or Natuk is left to conclude, that it is a document that is skewed towards achieving the aims of why we are here, to increase the contributions and increase the retirement age. But the reason for it is not properly justified. After all, there are over 1,500 appeals at the appeal tribunal, and there's no board in place to organize the tribunal. These claims are coming from persons who are unable to get off their sick bed, from persons who are disabled, persons who are challenged in various ways and require the social security, the social blanket, and for some reason, that claim isn't important. That claim is just somewhere in limbo. We are saying that it is not enough, it doesn't go far enough to speak about the real issue of NIS and its impact upon the working class.
Mr. Duke, is it that to some extent you misunderstand the nature and purpose of an actuarial report? Because your response does, in my opinion, display a misunderstanding of what this specific report is centered on and its intent and purpose. Is it that you are somehow misapprehending what the report is and what its function is?
So, member, I wish to restate my position. At the entrance of my preamble, I would have indicated to all House, and I believe you were most present when I said that we had insufficient time to run it by our members. And then you pose the question as to what our take is. I have given you my take, and now you are challenging my understanding of it. I'm wondering if I should have even spoken at all. I've said, we are going to operate outside of the narrow confines you have given to us, all right? But more or less, I've spoken about the report. You have given a report. We have gone through the report, a lot of statistics. Yes, that may be the way it is accustomed to be done. But we want to verify the information. How in 2013, when compared to 2063, we have a decline in the entire population, but a growth in those persons who are 60 plus. You know?
Okay.
What is the statistics based on?
Thank you, Ms. Yeah. So maybe I could probably lend some clarity to the dilemma that President Duke is facing, understanding two things. One, the population decline, and the increase in population in a particular age group. So let's see if we could deal with them sequentially. What is happening in Trinidad and Tobago, we are starting to join the ranks of countries where, because of many factors, increased access to health care, and so on, people are in fact living longer. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we are starting to see that phenomena, that you have more people living longer. Countries like Japan, they have that particular issue. So you have people living longer, but at the same time, our total fertility rate in Trinidad, that is, when you assume the number of children each woman would bear in her lifetime, and you scale that down to 1 year, what is happening is that our total fertility rate is declining. So two things are happening simultaneously. One, our people post-retirement are living longer, and the working population to provide the income stream to support them, that is declining because our birth rates are declining. There was a time, President Duke, you may remember, when governments had to fund, I think, 30,000 places for primary school children. Now that is down to 16 or 18,000. You could correct me if I'm wrong.
It's actually just over 18,000.
18,000. So we have an absolute decline in our birth rates. And that is one of the key drivers that is giving the National Insurance Scheme a problem. People living longer, and our birth rates have declined significantly because more women are delaying having children. They want to go to university, which is very fine, and they delay having children until their 30s, but then they do another thing. They make a conscious decision to have less children. So that is a big part of the social dynamic facing us. So I hope I have been able to bring some clarity to the issue.
Chair, if I may also add, initially just to say, since it's the first thing I'm saying apart from greetings, the presence of the tripartite system is important. So the government, the trade union movement representing labor, and the employers. One issue as well, the precursor to what Minister Diyal Singh mentioned, is when the system was set up, the population would have been much smaller and would have been growing. So the working population would have been growing. So therefore, the contributions per year would have been increasing each year as the working population increased and as the contributions also increased per member, per person. However, you are seeing a reversal of that. The working population is now declining, and the persons who are dependent on the retirement contributions by way of a pension, that is being extended. So you have that challenge, which has been recognized by a contribution from a member of the trade union movement. So in essence, as we begin the consultation with labor and employers, the issue really is what would be the concerns and what would be possible solutions that we can consider as a nation going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Gentlemen, maybe we could focus on 3 specific areas, and I would invite your views on these 3 specific areas. And the way I propose to deal with it is we hear the views of the 3 groups on the first area, then the second area, and then the third area. So I want to invite your discussions on 1, the issue of the contribution rate, because I think all of you are sufficiently experienced and involved in the issue of the contribution rates. It is something that comes up in every actuarial report, and it's something that has been addressed on numerous occasions. And this actuarial report, of course, talks about dealing with the contribution rate. It in fact, a change has already been implemented, but it also makes a point that you get to that point where your contribution rate starts being ineffective, and in fact, it becomes onerous on the contributor. So on the issue of contribution rate, I would like us to open that discussion. The second area is the issue of the retirement age. And we have, in fact, received a written submission from JTAM on the retirement age, but I would also like us to, for the benefit of the public, to have a discussion on the retirement age. And the third area I would like to invite your comments for the purposes of a discussion is on the area of the investment portfolio and its management. And we have the EC, we have groups which are represented and historically represented on the board of the NIB. And we actually have Mr. Anisette, who has been an NIB board member, and Mr. Nanku. Have you been on the board? But the ECA has long held positions on the board. So maybe I would invite J-Tom first on the issue of the contribution rate and your views on that.
I would just like to seek your concurrence for my colleague who is more schooled in that,
yeah, sure.
Comrade Burke, to speak to that. Yes.
Very good morning again. Peter Burke, would that be to you? The rates, the contribution rates for any scheme like the NIS is dependent on, just like in pensions, is dependent on a number of factors. The contributions is tied to the benefits and the number of people that are contributing and the contributions of the employer. And because of a number of factors in the society, including, as eloquently explained earlier by one of the members of your committee, declining birth rates, falling employment, and so on, and the type of employment, and the fact that the NIB cannot always capture all the workers. I think we have a significant amount of self-employed persons who are not captured in the net, so that the fund declines. And the chairman has asked for us to discuss investments after. Investments have generally been flat. So the contributions, a lot of pressure has been put on contributions because of those factors I just described. It is clear that information, data, the quality of data, will put the lack of the acquisition of quality data puts pressure on those already employed, and the targeting of new contributions becomes a lot more onerous. So I think in order to really do justice to the contribution to the NIS, we must ensure that we capture as much of the employees as possible, and we have to be better at policing this aspect of the operations of the scheme. We are inundated with a lot of complaints from workers that they contribute and they don't have when they go to get claims, there's no record of the claims being put. Now, we don't have these statistics to prove how rampant this is, but clearly this is an area that has to be given attention, that employers must remit deductions for NIS to the scheme. And when you delay those deductions, interest is lost and the fund suffers. So we need to look at that aspect of it, policing of the contributions by employer and employee. Having set the context, the actual report gives a very dire prediction as to what is going to happen if we don't address these issues. And it is clear that contribution rates of 36% is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And we must ensure that the efficiency in collection is increased, the policing of contributions is made efficient, and that we look as a society and as an economy at the investment climate, because there was a time when, as an institutional investor, probably the biggest institutional investor in the economy, the NIB would have been benefiting from returns, large returns on bonds and stocks and so on. and that's relatively flat at the moment. So we need to have a more efficient collection. And if it is that we are, as a society, engaging in employment practices which makes it a lot more difficult to collect contributions, I think that is something that we need to look at. A lot of self-employed people are out of the system. They are not captured by the system. And this does not augur well for the Social Security in the future. A lot of these workers who are self-employed will collect a pension, and that puts additional pressure on the system, especially given the fact that they may not have contributed while they were self-employed. So we have to look at this systematically, and we have to look at solutions which would ensure that contribution rates of 36% would not be necessary, because that would make it, we've had serious complaints about raising it to $500 in some cases. And it's extremely difficult for employees, particularly in an environment where there's a lot of difficulty in completing negotiations on time, to increase NIS contributions to those levels. We have to find a way, and it's not just one area of quality of contributions. There's such a certain set of policies that must be put in place to ensure that the NIB remains sustainable. Contributions is not the only answer. At this point in time, we know that we have a general idea where we need to look at, but our overall plan is I suppose, one of the purposes of this consultation. So we can say safely that those projected contributions cannot fly. Our position is that the issue of extending the retirement age to 65 is a situation that depends on collective bargaining, and it should not be imposed from outside. That may help, or it may just simply delay the inevitable. So we need to have more fundamental solutions to that problem. I think I can yield at this point.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want, for the record, just that you said that the 36%, in your view, is not sustainable. Could you be more specific?
Okay.
Or could you explain what you mean by sustainable?
I do not think that it's affordable, because
as a percentage of gross income.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted that clarified.
That is precisely what we.
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Nanku to address the issue of contribution rate from the point of view of the employers.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Chairman. Well, the long-term cost of the promised NIS benefits is significantly higher than the 13.2% of salaries currently being paid. The original structure of the NIS was designed to require increases in contribution rates over time. The problem is that increases are often resisted or considered unaffordable when required. I think more importantly, that something that we must take into consideration is that the contribution rate follows the aging rate. And that being said, we need to give, it doesn't give consideration to the impact of that moving to age 65. More importantly, while the proposed future increase, no doubt, are a mathematical solution to the funding problems of the NIS, we question whether they are realistic. If we are unprepared now to pay 23% contributions, why would any other future generation consider them affordable? Many other countries have been forced to scale back pension benefits as populations have aged, often with severe social disruption. While employers also acknowledge that contribution rate increases are inevitable, the level of increase proposed in the 9th actuarial review was generally not supported by those polled in our survey. which is something we did when we got the invitation, just to get a feel, yeah? At the same time, a reduction in benefits is likely to be met with significant social resistance. In this regard, the ECF proposes an acceptable mix of an affordable contribution increase coupled with a rationalization of benefits possible under this increase. Both the rate of increase and the change in benefits must be subject to extensive and inclusive consultation and tripartite dialogue.
Thank you very much. Natuk?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I wish to defer this question to the General Secretary, who will comment further on it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair and your members. From where Natuk sit, there has to be a holistic approach to this whole issues. And we have to pay attention to the realities of the particular situations. And let me place on record, Natuk has no qualms about actuarial reviews because that is part of any pension plan or social schemes. You must do it. You have to do it. We may have a problem with some of the outcomes, which we claim the right to have that disagreement. But in terms of the issue of the actuarial reviews, I want the records to be clear that we have no issues. The actuarial review is required every 5 years. Every 5. Statutory requirements is a 5-year cycle. Having said that, the issue to me is, what is the purpose of the actuarial evaluation? Is to do an analysis of all what we are talking about and make recommendations in the context of where we should go in terms of benefits. A fundamental point that is being missed is that too often benefits increases are politically motivated and has nothing to do with the actuarial evaluation. Our records would have demonstrated that from time to time, there are increases announced by the Minister of Finance, Parliament approve it. And there is no reference to the implications in terms of the liability that those increases are being placed on the plan. And our research would have told us that that scenario between the period 2003 to 2016 would have cost the NIS over $10 billion in payments. And the point that Natuk wants to make is that that payment had nothing to do with a reference to the actuarial reviews analysis in terms of where we have to go. And therefore, there is a disjointment of what the actuarial revenues is saying in terms of what we're supposed to do and what is happening. Having said that, I would like to make a particular point. When we look at, and this is a national insurance document that I'm quoting from, which deals with key performance indicator for the year ending 2016. And what it says is that benefit payments amounted to $4.51 billion. Contribution incomes, which is critical, amounted to $4.25 billion. Realized investment income amounted to $1 billion. But the total assets, and that is critical and that is important, of the scheme is $25.49 billion. And
when you look at the administrative costs, it is 5.32 percentage points of the contribution income. And the question that I want to pose here today is when you look at the contribution income as opposed to the payment benefits, which is critical, which because we're talking about income and we're talking about paying out. The point that Natuk was making is that when one looks at the amount of persons who are out of the loop, and this, with the greatest of respect, actuarial evaluation does not address that particular issue. This actuarial evaluation does not address the issue of several employers that we have who are not registered and therefore who are not paying their contributions. And we are saying in Natuk, if we have to make decisions of that nature, we must do it in a holistic way where all the indicators, where all the data is before us that will give us the ability to do the kind of analysis that is necessary and make the projection that is necessary. And when Comrade Jukes was making his point, he was making the point in that context. How could an actuarial evaluation make those kinds of projections when several indices, several indicators, and several realities are not part of the evaluation? And therefore, we are saying in the National Trade Union Center that if we are to comment on that specific issue, it will be flawed in our view if we do not have the holistic data that is necessary. How many employers are not paying the contribution? How many employers that deduct their contributions and do not remit it to NIB? How many employees we have outside there, be it self-employed, etc., that are not making contributions? And therefore, if those contributions are realized, what will be the position in terms of the contribution income that we have at $4.25 billion? And I think that if we are doing any critical analysis, Mr. Chair, I think from where we sit, from the National Trade Union Center, that has to be a critical ingredient, and we are saying that it is lacking, and therefore, to make a projection in the absence of having those fundamentals will be doing an injustice from where we sit in the context of making a statement on a presumption without having all the data that is necessary for us to make that kind of contribution.
Thank you very much. And before I pass on to the other members of the committee, on the issue of contributions, which is the first issue I asked the three groups to address, I want to ask this question because the National Insurance has National Insurance Board, National Insurance Appeals Tribunal, still retain a very unique structure in the country, which is a tripartite structure. And I think it was deliberate, and it represents the way it is dealt with in the region. But I wanted to ask you, since you've raised, not just Natuk, you've raised the issue of the failure of employers to contribute, and you've raised the issue elsewhere of the record of contribution. And I speak because I've served both at the tribunal and elsewhere in the NIB. And I'm familiar with the problems at the tribunal that Mr. Duke pointed to. And let me say, Mr. Duke, I know that Cabinet has approved the three tribunals, and it rests with His Excellency the President to make the appointment. I know the names have been approved. What have you done on the employer's side and the trade union side, given that you are represented on the board of NIB? What have you done in relation to this failure of employers to contribute as they should under the law to the fund, having deducted the contributions from the membership? And what have you done to improve the performance of the National Insurance Board in relation to making sure that the records of service and contributions are available to contributors on a timely basis, particularly as they approach retirement?
You going first?
Mr. Chairman, Peter Burke, WTU. Now, quite frankly, that sort of oversight is the purview of the board. And in some cases, I am familiar with one example where an employer didn't contribute for a period of time, and they had to pay over $4 million in fines and so on. Now, I suspect that the scarcity of proper data is contributing to the problem. But once these infringers are detected, I think it's the responsibility of the board to take action against these errant employers. As a practicing trade unionist, once these issues are detected, we would normally take it through the grievance procedure and probably inform the authority that this employer has not been passing contributions to the NIB. But I must emphasize the importance of the board itself beefing up its oversight over employers, because at the end of the day, if it is lax, people will take the chance and not contribute in accordance with the law.
Thank you. Before we move on, I just want to invite Member Dial Singh.
Thank you. Thank you again. Mr. Anisette, General Secretary, is quite correct when he says that we should take a holistic approach to this. So far, we have been focusing on the contribution stream of income to NIB. If I could just, with your permission, Mr. Chair, and through you, shine a light on the other income stream, which is investments. And I want to make the point that countries that have set up robust investment instruments, like Trinidad and Tobago's own Heritage and Stabilization Fund, which is performing very well. In the case of Norway, they have a Heritage and Stabilization Fund approaching $1 trillion, and which they are going to probably dip into for the first time, and it's performing well, mainly because of governance issues. I want to ask about NIB's investment policy, and directly, I don't know if members are here, their investment committee, which have a duty to invest their workers' funds in investment instruments, which at the very minimum, at least maintains the investment's capital value. And I want to ask specifically, I don't know if anyone here can answer it, maybe we need to go back a few years. There was an investment decision made by the NIB in 2014, Mr. Chair, to purchase Apsara and Tamnaktai restaurants around the Savannah, which were then Queen's Park East, I believe, which were independently valued at $16.5 million. That was the independent valuation. NIB, for whatever reason, paid the owners $37 million. So they overpaid for these properties in 2014 by $20.5 million. In addition to that, they then spent $5 million of employees' contributions, having already overspent by 20.5, add another 5, to repair the buildings not for the use of NIB, but then leased it back to the owners, Mr. Kavanagh and Mr. Mohammed. I see members smile, I see Mr. Nanku smiling, and leased it back to the owners. And I want to ask the question, what would have driven that type of investment decision to take contributions to purchase a property valued at $16.5 million, pay the owners $37 million, more than twice the independent valuation, then spend $5 million to repair it, and then lease it back to the owners? So Mr. Anisette, General Secretary, is quite correct when he said we need to look at this whole thing holistically. So when we focus on direct contributions, if the NIB made wise investment decisions, as Trinidad and Tobago's Heritage and Stabilization Fund, as Norway's Heritage and Stabilization Fund, it could have a very positive impact on the employees that we seek to protect. So the question that needs to be thrown out there is what drove this investment decision, Mr. Chair, in 2014?
Well, if I may respond, Chair, to Member Dial Singh, we have been talking about a tripartite board, okay? And as far as I'm aware, it's balanced in terms of 3 representatives, employers, trade union, and government. And the government holds the chair, okay? The chair also of the investment committee, as far as my memory recalls, has the opportunity. So that this is not something, and I'm not in any way trying to defend what you are saying, okay? But we have to stay consistent with the fact that that was a decision that would have been made in the full view of the tripartite body. Now, you spoke about the investment, and I know for a fact that there's a limitation as distinct from the Heritage Stabilization Fund. The opportunity they have to do overseas investment, the NIB has a limitation to that. And I am well aware that efforts would have been made to the respective ministers of finance to give the NIB some room where that is concerned. I think Minister Hawaii gave some temporary room, yeah? But I don't know what the state of play is. So I am of the view, and I do agree, that there is an absolute need for the NIB to be given the opportunity to do investments, increase so that the spread could realize more benefits.
So are you saying the decision in 2014 to purchase Tamnaktai and Apsara for $37 million when a valuation was a 16.5 was a government decision?
No, I'm not in any way saying that. I'm just reiterating.
Would you consider it a wise investment decision?
No, not at all.
Thank you.
Not at all. I was just saying, making the point that we are talking here, just as we are sitting here in this room today, as a tripartite.
Thank you.
Yeah, so blame ought not to be passed on any one particular entity. That's the point I'm making.
Fully agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I want to invite Member Francis.
Mr. Nanku, morning again. How do you respond to the suggestions of employers acting improperly in terms of not registering on one hand and then not making remittances on the other hand?
Well, remember, I'm not in any way here to defend any employer who does not comply with the law, okay? Employer compliance is approximately now about 89.9%, okay? And certainly, one would expect a higher level of compliance. Mm-hmm. I know that the NIB, they're just as generally in the country, it's about enforcement, okay? And we can have as many laws written on the books, but if there isn't enforcement, then, nothing is going to happen. Again, I am aware that more recently the NIB introduced a stakeholder subcommittee of the board primarily to focus on collections and all the rest of it. Going back to the days where you had compliance officers walking with a big set of spreadsheets and so on. Some of us who are old enough to recall that. They come to your office, you know, every Monday morning with a big binder, and they sit down and, you know, and stick on stamps and whatever it is. So it's really, there has been a fall off in terms of collections, and that insistence, you know, to deal to close those gaps. Okay. And that's the reality.
All right. If your association were to become aware of any employer or employers who are not in compliance, do you all in any way attempt to encourage?
Of course. As we do sensitization sessions and so on, orientation sessions, we encourage our members to ensure that they comply with all statutory regulations and all the rest of it. So it is it's an ongoing effort by the Employers Consultative Association to ensure that our members recognize the importance of compliance.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Nanku, how many employers have been charged, successfully prosecuted for not complying and protecting? I mean, I'm all for workers being protected. So the question is, as a body, how many people, how many employers have been charged for this offense?
I know that some would have been, and I'm speaking from the perspective of being on the NIB board for a period of time. I know that legal action has been taken, but I'm not in a position to say, you know, to speak to the numbers, the specifics of the numbers and so on. But I know that, you know, that legal action has in fact been taken against some of those.
May I urge that this be treated with some degree of urgency? Because I think the trade union movement, they really have a legitimate concern, as I do, and I share their concern, that employers who are not fulfilling their mandate ought to be penalized to the fullest extent of the law. This is abominable. So may I encourage you to beef up your legal department and make sure errant employers are brought to book. I share this with the trade union movement.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I can crave your indulgence, I think a lot of the questions being asked basically fall outside of the remit of the National Trade Union Center and the Joint Trade Union Movement to answer. For example, that question of the investment made in 2014, for example. I think those things fall within the remit of the NIB board. I mean, we came here this morning not in the context of being part of the NIB board, but in our capacity as organizations that represent thousands of people.
Let me just clarify that, because I think I set out the context. I made the point that it is a tripartite structure, and the nomination, in fact, the need for JTUM and NATOC to nominate members to the NIB board is something that has been litigated. It's been strongly defended over the years. And it is a tripartite board. And in the same way the government is accountable for NIB, the employers and the trade unions are accountable, because it is jointly we comprise the boards. So if questions are being asked to NATOC, ECA, or JTUM this morning in relation not only to the National Insurance Board, but to the Investment Committee, because the Investment Committee, the statute sets out that the Investment Committee be comprised of 4 persons, an independent chairman, and representatives of government, labor, and employers. So that is the context. Not that the individuals here are able to speak for decisions made at particular board meetings in relation to particular decisions, but in terms of your relationship with the board through the people you put on the board. I just want to ask Nat to because you didn't have the opportunity to address the issue which I raised, which is what have you said to the members on your representatives on the NIB board in relation to employers who are not contributing but deducting contributions, and in relation to the issue of records of contributions of members?
Honorable Chair, before I answer, NATUC takes its responsibility seriously. And there are things, unfortunately, that we cannot discuss with our members on our board because there's a fiduciary responsibilities in the context of not allowing certain informations from the board to be discussed among your colleagues and them. A legal responsibility, and we take our fiduciary responsibility seriously. Having said that, we would have made a lot of public pronouncements in the context of what you are saying. And for example, let me read fines. An employer who fails to register will be liable to a fine of $5,000 on summary conviction. That's what the law says. So the laws, in our views, encourages employers not to register. And we want to make a recommendation that this fine be increased so that the penalty going to be real, the penalty going to be reflective of what we are saying. And we also want to say, given our experience where some employers, they pay it and they continue not to make the contributions, that those employers are held to a higher accountability, not by way of a fine, but fine plus. That's the first point that we want to make. The second point, and I disagree with my learn from the ECA when he's talk about 89% registration. Because if one looks at what is the definition under the NIB rules and regulation of an employer, and I'll read it into the records. Employer means a person who employs at least one person under a contract of service. Let me repeat it. Employer, based on our laws in Trinidad and Tobago, which is part of the NIB rules and regulations and law, states that an employer is a person who employs at least one person under a contract of service. In other words, one person, if you employ them under a contract of service, they have to make a contribution. And we know in Trinidad and Tobago, that is not a reality. It is not a fact. And that is why we are saying in the context of contributions and in the context of the evaluation that was done by the actuaries, that all these evidence-based realities must be factored into the conclusion that you are charged with and we are charged with. How do we put a mechanism in place to capture all these realities in Trinidad and Tobago, which I believe will go a long way in assisting the funds, which is the contribution funds, which may very well not result in the evaluation and recommendation that came out from the actuarial evaluation, because I am concerned, all right, because we know, and it's not knocking employers, but we know any increases, what are the likely consequences. Because when one takes into consideration, the recommendation is to go to 22 percentage points for the employers. That can have a negative effect in the context of employment in Trinidad and Tobago. So we want to place that on the record. And when one takes into consideration that that is not the only contribution that one has to make, when one talks about health charge, when one talks about PAYE, and all the other contributions that we are called upon to make, which affects your dollars, one will understand, with the greatest respect to the employer, why there will be a resistance coming from that kind of increase, all right, that will create a problem. The other issue that I wanted to raise, in Norway, and I agree, we need to find innovative and creative ways in terms of how we manage our assets and our investment portfolio. But in Norway, there's a special group and a special body who are experts in investments that is set up to do those investments on behalf of Norway. That is why you are seeing that kind of return. Does NIB have that kind of expertise? I beg to say no, because when I was on the NIB board, that kind of expertise was not there. And the question of how we invest outside, because it was 25% we were allowed to invest outside, right, did not afford us the opportunities at that particular point in time, and I'm making reference to when I was on the board, to really capture the investment portfolios internationally that would have realized the kinds of returns that is necessary. And we are saying in the National Trade Union Center that the government must look at that question of the investment portfolio to see how we could have the checks and balances, yes, because we must have checks and balances. But to give the NIB, by setting up a particular department that is charged and who are professional and experts in that field, to do the kinds of investments that is necessary to get the kinds of returns to take the fund to another level. Because the 75% investments in Trinidad and Tobago, given our stock exchange market and the limitation of that stock exchange market, will not realize the kinds of returns that is required to take us to the place where we want to be. And the place that we want to be in the context of the National Trade Union Center is that we manage our investment portfolio in such a manner that our investment portfolio will realize the kinds of returns that we could put back into the funds that will take away that onerous responsibilities on the workers. And I don't want to speak for the employers, and the employers in the context of how we move forward. We don't share the view, and I want to make it clear, as my friends say, that we have a mix, all right, and reductions of our benefits over, we don't share that view.
Okay, thank you very much. And in the remaining time, I would first ask Mr. Obika and then Dr. Francis, and then I would ask you to return to the discussions on the remaining two issues, which would be the retirement age and your views, and the investment portfolio and its management. And you've already expressed some views. If there is anything more you would like to say on the investment portfolio and its management, but I'd ask Member Obika to make his contribution.
All right, thanks, Chair. At this time, I'd want to remind the persons of how we started. Despite the statement of the minister who sat next to me, I'm sorry he's not here when I'm stating this, but the chair, the substantive chair of this committee is an independent senator, all right? And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that we want, when you come to make your contributions here, the spirit is such, all right? I don't need to read and spell between the lines. So it's unfortunate the direction that was taken by the member that sat next to me. However, we can be critical of issues without having to defend. The aim is not for you to come and defend a position which doesn't move the process forward, all right? So the question I have for for all present really would be, given the classification of an employer, especially the trade union movement, what suggestions, and this could be something that could be brought after today's session, what suggestions do you have for a nation, our nation, to capture the employers who may not be members of the ECA, or who may not even consider themselves employers because they may not be familiar with the law, right? We have a lot of undocumented workers. We have a lot of workers who are in the informal sector. I know that the persons dealing with domestic workers, NUDE, that trade union, they do some work there, but domestic employees may not be the majority, all right? So you have a lot of vendors who employ persons as well. So if you can come with suggestions that could bring those classes of workers and employers into the net that we can take on board. This may be for another time, all right? And just remind you that it is not for you to defend a position if a statement may seem to be critical of a job or a post that you held prior, but really to bring forward a solution. So you could swerve some things that you may feel may be directed at you. Chair.
Thank you. Member Francis?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to respond briefly to the member who would have asked the question, what suggestions? I want to put it on the record that it is not for us to suggest suggestions. I think Trinidad and Tobago is exhausted with suggestions. Report after report, consultancy after consultancy. What we need is the political will to bring people who are self-employed, whether they know it or not, into the fray where they begin to make meaningful contributions. It would require some level of education, but I'm certain that somewhere in one of those dusty manuals or consultant package, we could find the answers there. So let's just effect it because we already have the answers.
Yeah, thank you. And Minister Francis.
Yeah. Either for Natok or JTM, I think there's a consensus in the room that we have capture issues in terms of employees and potential employees, those who can't contribute. We also have compliance issues in terms of employers who are not as scrupulous as they probably ought to be. Is the suggestion that those issues trump or nullify the demographic concerns highlighted in the report? Meaning, if it is that we got to 100% compliance in terms of employers, and we corralled all of those self-employed people and got them to contribute to the fund, that would neutralize the problems posed by the demographic issues we've discussed earlier. Is that the position? Just clarification. Is it because the numbers are not known and that will require some further study? Or is it the case that we still have a fundamental problem in terms of rationalizing this insurance scheme?
Well, just one perhaps quick response from JTM on that, and simply put, we would have to some extent see what the experience is once, if we hypothetically got to that place, because one of the things we are saying is that and being implied here is that there's need for greater efficiencies in the system, and not apart from those compliance issues, the efficiency of the administration itself within the national insurance system, because that's another thing that was the internal efficiencies, because in some cases the National Insurance Board cannot tell a worker, cannot give them an accurate statement or representation, even where the employer, in some cases, like my own union, have evidence that they have remitted the funds. So there is need for a greater efficiency in the system at all levels. And what we are saying, one of the things we are saying is that should we come to that place, clearly there anticipated will be an improved position, and we would have to see to what impact it has as we go forward. We feel that it will have some positive impact, but we cannot say categorically that it will alleviate all of the issues that we are confronted with, but it could certainly impact on the contribution rate as we go forward, or what is required. That's my comment.
Mr. Anisette.
Yeah, member, an actuarial evaluation in pension plans, social schemes, is absolutely necessary. And it is necessary to speak to what you are saying.
And I thank you for that clarification.
All right.
And intervention.
And then therefore, the question of what kinds of contribution, the questions of what kinds of monies that will be required will be dictated by what the actuary sees and the demographics. Yes. But I know of schemes where, because of the investment portfolio, because of how the scheme, and I'm talking about pension plan, has been managed, there are situations where the very same point that you are talking about is taken into consideration in the context of the actuarial evaluations. All right? And I share the view of my colleague that to make a definite statement will be unfair. It will be based on assumptions. We in the National Trade Union Center believes that when we do the comprehensive analysis of all what we are talking about, if we get all these people in the net, and I want to suggest that one of the things that we can do, as I've seen in other countries, that we have a register of employers. Everybody who is an employer must be registered, and therefore, if you don't register, there's another serious fine as it relates to that, so that we'll be able to capture all those who are employers. And I would just want to give you an example. How many doctors pay NIS? Private doctors I'm talking about, and we have a lot. How many of them? They don't even get a receipt, with the greatest of respect. How many lawyers? With the greatest of respect, pay NIS. But we, the workers, based on the law and the requirements, must make our payments because it is deducted from our wages. But we have another group of people who makes, I was by a doctor, a private doctor, it's $200 I pay him. And I get a receipt and I know NIS is not being paid. You understand? And you see, those are the kind of realities that we have to look at. And we're talking about real issues that is confronting Trinidad and Tobago because they are not making contributions to the NIS, but they could benefit, and their families. So the point that Natuk is making, and the point that Natuk is saying, unless we have the empirical evidence as it relates to contributions, investments, the demographics, and you do the kind of actuarial evaluations, the potential for what you want to call returns on the investment, is a whole series of metrics that will be required in order for you to make what I want to say an informed statement in respect to the question you asked. Now, I appreciate what you're asking, and I'm hoping that coming out of this, that all the statement that is being made will be put on the front burner so that we can take Trinidad and Tobago to a place where we don't find ourselves, as they say, in 2060, that we don't have social security for the population of Trinidad and Tobago. And we believe that this is critical. We want to thank you all for the foresight, and we need to work like yesterday in order to get this right, because there are several countries that I can quote that got it right, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can work towards taking us to the place where we are sure that we will be able to protect all our citizens.
Okay. Mr. Anisette, the projections of the fund running out are a generation away. But there is an immediate projection which is, in my opinion, discomforting, which is that by 2018, the fund will start tapping into the principal as opposed to contributions or returns on investment in terms of making remittances to people. So the problem is perhaps a little bit down the road, but if there is any great accuracy in the report, we will start facing real difficult implications from next year. How do you respond to that?
I like what you say. You're almost saying what Duke has been saying, but in a different way. If there is great accuracies in the report. No, I welcome that statement.
No, because you are questioning.
I welcome that
I am not
statement, my friend.
No, Mr. Ane said, let me be very clear. I am not questioning.
No.
But it is clear that you are questioning.
Right.
So I am framing the question in the context of the way that you have responded.
But all I'm saying that I welcome the statement that you made. If there's great accuracy in the actuarial evaluation
Thank you very much.
That is on your records. All right? Having said that, no, I hear what you're saying, and that is why I quoted the key performance indicator for the year ending 16. And when you look at it, you have beneficiaries of 189,377 beneficiaries for that period of time. Benefit payments is 4.51 billion. Contributions, income is 4.25 billion. So we have an issue there, all right? Given the contribution income, all right, is less than the benefit payments. But when you go further down and you look at realized investment income, it's $1 billion. So that is an investment income that you are getting, which is real. The question to me, from where I sit, is how do we deal with that realized investment income, given the fact that while we have a shortfall here, it is not alarming. But if we don't address it, we're going to have issues. And when I take into consideration what is the ratio in the context of total assets, because NIB have $25.49 billion in assets. So we don't have a cash flow problem. We don't have issues in terms of monies. From where we sit in NATU, and the final point, which is critical, which no one is paying attention to, administrative expenditure is only 5.32 percentage points of contribution of income. So when you work it out, we are not at a bad place. But if we allow it to continue along that line, yes, we're going to have issues. So to me, and when I say me, meaning NATO, the issue is how we manage this portfolio to ensure that we get that balance that is necessary so that we wouldn't reach to that place that the actuary was talking about in 2018.
Okay,
and I believe that if we look at the figures here, which is, I want to say real figures because this is coming from NIB, that we could manage that portfolio in a manner that we wouldn't have that kind of fear.
So do you accept that there is a fundamental issue that transcends issues of efficiency, capture, and compliance?
No, I am not saying that. Because efficiencies going to drive the process too. Because even though if we capture this and there's inefficiencies, we're going to have issues. So that is why we are saying in the National Trade Union Center, and my comrades from the other, we are saying the question of efficiencies must be interlinked or must be connected with the whole process. So I wouldn't leave out the issue of efficiencies. Efficiencies
not
has to be
aside from transcending.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
gentlemen.
No.
Let us,
I am saying it is interconnected to the whole picture that we are painting in the National Trade Union Center.
let us move towards the end because we have the sitting of the lower house this afternoon. And at
we
least
are now
one,
getting warm up here.
at least one person has to be there.
Not was now getting warm up.
Let me ask, as we close, let me ask the ECA and then Natuk to address specifically the issue of the retirement age.
Well, in the interest of time, relative to the retirement age, as far as we are concerned, they're talking about the review speaks to retirement age 65 over a period of 36 years. We are saying that it has to be much faster than that. And we have the belief that it can be, because we have examples right around us. We have Barbados, who moved from 60 to 67 over a period of 12 years. St. Lucia increased from 60 to 65 over 15 years. So we find it very difficult, to accept the proposed review about this gradual increase. We see no reason for this.
Thank you very much. And Natuk?
Mr. Chairman, greetings again. At the National Trade Union Center, we have serious concerns about that. We are representing again thousands of employees throughout this country. And when we met in our little session, we tried to decipher how best to approach this. And we came up with several ideas. One, that whole age movement is something of a collective agreement where people sit down and they will discuss with the employer. Because some unions may want it for a particular group of persons, as the case with NUGE. NUGE had their retirement age moved from 65 to 60 with the intention and a promissory note that they would be given a pension. And from then to now, they have gotten no pension at all whatsoever. And that's daily rated workers, right? And not all over, but certain places, so they continue to work from 60 to 65 because they're not getting a pension. Generally, in the public service, persons are concerned about that. They are fatigued with the system. People want to retire at 55. Hence, the Civil Service Act provides for persons to retire at 55 with full benefits. Why is it a man should want to work until 65? And then you put a curse upon him if he take it at 60. So it's kind of crazy and something that we don't subscribe to. And we will have to put this before our individual unions or units within NATO. None of us here are gifted with the ability to read minds and speaking on behalf of all persons with such an important issue. Furthermore, because of the national effect of this issue upon the population, we would want to suggest and place on record that this may require a national referendum. It's so serious.
Okay, gentlemen, I would take one comment or contribution from Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I just want to, I think it's important for JTAM to just put its position on this, because whilst my colleague earlier would have briefly mentioned our position, I just wanted to be clear on the record that the joint trade union movement also, we would have a serious problem with the movement of the retirement age from 60 to 65 for some of the reasons mentioned. But one of the concerns we have is that you're almost beginning to get the impression, at least some members have indicated, that okay, we have a financial issue with the national insurance thing, and mathematically it seems as if okay, so 65 will solve that. But then if you take that to its logical conclusion, suppose the financial situation was worse. What do you go to, 67 or 71? It cannot be that a retirement age is premised significantly just on the financial considerations, though it's very important, because a retirement age for a working person is not just premised on that. It's somebody who started working 35 years ago and planned to retire at 60. They make all kinds of projections, not just financial. They make retirement plans, in terms of finance for their pension and etc., but they make other kinds of considerations for family all that type of thing, what they will do. So it is not that, and let me just make, it's not that people or workers in Trinidad and Tobago do not work past 60. A lot of people, after they retire, go back into some kind of work activity, but it's not necessarily one in which they go back into maybe structured work activity. So the majority of our members do plan and want to retire at age 60. And while I've heard the contribution from the Employers Consultative Association, I don't think I've heard a reason why they would want, I've heard their projections of moving this quickly, but there's no rational or reason given as to why the employer section would want a later retirement age. That will need to be justified. I know we don't have the time now, but clearly we would need to be convinced, because we have collective agreements and RMU where workers retire at 60 and even earlier. So I know we're short of time, but I think I just wanted to make JTAM's position clear. The majority of our collective agreements currently have this at 60, and there are a whole lot of reasons for that. And we cannot see that just the national insurance system outside of those RMUs pushing for whether legislative or other change to get this to 65 or any other age without significant consultation and with the truly, and of course with all these employers through the collective agreement. So I don't think we could resolve this today, but I just want to put on the record our position in terms of where it is at 60 for the majority. That is the JTAM's position of where it should remain.
Thank you very much. And before we close, I just want to make two final comments. The first is to say one of the issues we've discussed today was the investment portfolio, and you raised this, it's been a long outstanding issue in terms of the ability of local investors to invest in foreign markets. That was a matter that was addressed by the Joint Select Committee, which considered the insurance bill. That committee submitted 4 interim reports to the Parliament and a final report, and the final report addresses the proposals to change the current clause in the bill is clause 85, and that report addresses the proposals to change the split between permissible foreign investment and permissible local investment, and you should take a look at that. And the other point I want to make as we close is my colleague, Mr. Obika, is new both to the Senate and to the Joint Select Committee. I want to say that I believe that the question asked by Member Dial Singh on Apsara was a fair question, because I had said we want to get views on 3 issues: the contribution rate, the retirement age, and the investment portfolio. The Apsara investment comes out of the investment portfolio in the NIB. It is a matter in the public domain, and I think it was a fair question. In fact, on the last occasion, I myself asked of NIB questions relating to the Riverwood investment, which, as you know, Mr. Anisette and others know, it's a long outstanding issue, and I also asked questions relating to the $728 million investment placed with Clico Investment Bank. And in fairness to Member Dial Singh, I believe it was a fair question to ask of you. I thank you very much for your participation. I ask you to make further submissions in writing when you have consulted, and the committee, I'm sure, will review, as we always do, your further submissions, and if necessary, invite you to make a further appearance for the purpose of a public discussion on what you have submitted. Thank you very much, and I want to thank the Secretariat for their support and the other members of the committee. Thank you very much.